Welcome to the first class on reactive documents for the web. In this class, we're going to have a look at reactive documents using or basing our work on a framework similar to Tangle. Now, Tangle is a framework that's almost 10 years old now, so instead we're going to bring it to some modern tools, namely Mithril.js. What is a reactive document? Reactive document has elements where you can react, where if you alter them, the document content changes with it. So for example, if I change this cookie, it will increase the number of calories, as you can see. Likewise, when I click on this, the document contents will change in of itself. So to do all this, there's a number of ways you can do it. We're going to do all of this within Mithril.js. So before continuing, feel free to pause the video and go through the Hello World examples and the quick start in order to understand what and how we're going to build it. Now that you're back, let's start building our reactive document example. So to do this, we're going to use CodePen because it allows us an easy way to get started. So let's open up CodePen and begin. So first and foremost, we're going to need to add Mithril.js to our CodePen. Okay, so to do this, let's copy the reference to Mithril.js and we'll just load it in like so. All right. So this should add the Mithril.js resource. Now let's create an element for this to go in. So I'm going to call this document. And then in the JS section, we're going to just reference this, get document dot get element by ID. And then from here, we can do something very similar to what was done in the Hello World example, where they render root, except now that we're referencing an element, we can do this a little bit different. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an m.mount based on root, and we are going to add a view. So to add a view, what we're going to do is we have an element or view, a key within this within this object with a key view and the function. We're just going to start off by saying it will just return hello world. So it will look something like this. All right. So now we can see the hello world example. So the next step is, how do we get the reactive document working? So to do that, let's firstly add a slider. So to add a slider to the document, how we would do this is we would use an input range for a slider. So I'm going to delete hello world for now, and let's add an array of objects that we want to add. So I'm going to create firstly a label for my slider. And I am going to call the slider, well, let's call the slider, right? And I'm going to use this very same thing, semantics, as what was entangled, and I'm just going to use a cookie example, right? So we're just going to call it cookies. Oops. Cookies. So cookies, and let's create our slider. So input type equals range, and we're going to give this some properties so that we can actually make it workable. So we can have a minimum of 0 cookies, and let's just say the maximum cookies that we want this to have is 10. We want the step size to be 1 because we are dealing with whole cookies. And what do we want the value to be? Now, we're going to set the value to be a variable called cookies, which obviously doesn't exist right now. And with regards to what the slider is called, well, we're already given it the ID here, so we're going to have to match it and call it slider. And then the last thing we're going to have is we're going to add an attribute that's for onInput. We want to assign the variable cookies, right? Because as we called it here, to this dot value, right? So that's how this works. Now, firstly, let's create our variable cookies, and let's say that we're going to start off by saying the number of cookies that we're going to start off with is 2, because I'm feeling like 2 cookies today. The next thing is let's make sure that our input slider works. So let's change our labels to actually tell us how many cookies there are. Right, and now if I move this slider, you can see that, oh, we have a reactive document. All right, so let's finish off this first example before we go into how the buttons may work. So the next thing, what we want to do is we want to have something that generates some kind of calculation and also some kind of text dynamically in order to say how many calories a cookie should have. So this is quite an easy calculator, because it's just the number of cookies times 50 for 50 cookies per 50 calories per cookie. So let's just create this function very quickly, cookies, and it will just return cookies times 50. Right. Okay, so that's our cookie calculator. And what do we want to do? Now, what we want to do is whenever something changes, we want cookies calculated to reflect what is written down. So just for argument's sake, I'm going to create a new function called the document's text, which generates the text for the document, just so that it's easier to change later. So we're going to copy the same kind of format as Tangled. So when you eat however many cookies, you have so many calories. So right. So let's put it here, and let's begin to break this up. So plus cookies. All right. You consume however many calories. All right. So cookies and cookies calculator times cookies. Right. So that's our document text, and hopefully, what would happen is when we add this to this bit down here, Mithril.js should be smart enough to know what to do with this. So let's see what happens. So let's watch our document generate this text dynamically. So cookies. Okay. So when you eat 2 cookies, you consume 100 calories. When I eat 7 cookies, I consume 350 calories. So there we go. We have the very first example of what we want to do. But let's go beyond this. Let's say we want to add some way to enable toppings for our cookies. So a choc chip or no toppings, and we want this to reflect in our document as well. How might we do that? Okay, so that's the next and natural extension of what we're going to do. So to do this, we need to create basically like a radio type form input. So let's do that. Okay. So to do this, we're going to create a variable to hold the toppings information. So we're going to call it topping. And I'm just going to have 2 toppings for now. We're just going to call it none, so no topping. And the other topping we're going to have is choc chip. And if you want as an exercise, you can extend this and see how, and think about how you can extend this. And I'm going to say that the calories for the toppings or choc would be, let's say, an extra 25 calories per cookie, and none, well, that's 0 extra calories because you have nothing, right? So there we have. I'm also going to create a nice lookup for my text. So I'm going to say choc would be when you, so what do I want to say? When you eat 5 cookies with choc chips, so with choc chips, you consume however many calories. Okay, so that looks like pretty close to what we want. So let's go with none, or none is nothing, so that works out fine. The next thing is we want to change our cookie calculator to include toppings, right? So so let's have our toppings here. So then our calories should now change to 50 plus toppings calories. I realize I spelled calories wrong above, so we'll fix this of toppings, and let's set this to a default value of none, so that this code should still work. Okay, so we can still see that this works, and we haven't changed anything. So the next thing that we want to do is we actually want to add a radio to our reactive document, or like a radio input. So to do this, let's create a bunch of options for our radio. Okay, I'm going to call it topping option, and I am going to have it to be a function. It takes in a value and a label, just so that we can not repeat too much code in terms of if we want to add it later. And let's create an object that holds some information for us. So firstly, I said this is going to be a radio input, right? And I want the ID of this to be the value that we assign, and I want the name of this to always be the same for whatever option we give it, which is going to be topping. And then I want on change, I want the variable topping to be updated, right? So topping equals the events.target.value, right? Okay. What we also want this function to do is we also want to check what is the topping that's been selected. If it's equal to what we currently have, we want the checkbox to be enabled. Okay, so if topping ops.value equals topping, okay, so we want topping ops.checked to be equal to true. Okay, if it's not equal, like after it's been assigned, well then we don't want to make it checked. And then we want to return, of course, what this thing looks like. So the label, which is going to be for this particular radio input. Okay, so we're almost there now. So we've created a skeleton of how this would all fit together. So the last step, of course, is to, well, put everything into place. So let's go ahead and add the ability to include our topping option, and hopefully everything falls into place. So value, well, no topping to start off with, right? Label, we're going to call this no topping. Okay, and then we're going to also have an option which is choc, because that's what I called the keys, and this is going to be choc chip. Add a comma, and hopefully everything will work. And when I change the choc chip, oh, it doesn't quite work. So let's have a look at what hasn't changed. So, or let's click here. Unexpected identifier expected either a closing brace or comment following an array. Okay, so let's have a look at what we've missed out. Let's format our code first. Hopefully it'll be easier to see. Actually, no. Okay. So what's probably happened is, oh, the topping is not in our cookie calculator. So if we change and add our topping, then hopefully this will be reflected correctly. So our document text doesn't have toppings either, so we need to add topping to our document text. So let's go ahead and do that. Now hopefully, now we can see that it correctly calculates the number of calories, right? But we're still missing the additional text that we wanted, which was with choc chips and none. So let's go ahead and add that in our document text because I haven't changed it. So when you eat however many cookies, right, and we want to have the custom text that I defined, which is topping text plus topping text of topping. Alright, and let's format. Okay, so now when you eat 2 cookies with choc chips, you consume 150 calories. So now there we have it. We now have a reactive document, which allows us to click through. We have sliders to change our document dynamically, and also radio buttons which have options to do things. And that essentially has all the components that you would want that form part of the Tangle library. We've done it in a very, very short period of time. And it also demonstrates how powerful Mithril.js is as a framework. So hopefully that's been useful and gives you a taste of how you can build reactive documents for the web in a very easy and straightforward manner.